our keynote for today, we wanted to welcome you and just go over a couple of logistical things. Go ahead, Nathan. So on our agenda today, we're starting this morning with a keynote from Cynthia Solomon that will start shortly after this logistical discussion. After that, we have a panel that starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, remembering and celebrating the work of Mike Eisenberg. That's a panel with myself, Mike Horn, Yasmin Kafai, Sherry C, and Hanju O. So don't miss that. It's a wonderful occasion to celebrate the career and work of a really extraordinary scholar and person. So please join us for that at 1. And this is just an overview of what else is on the agenda today. So this morning, again, and excuse me, this morning for me, so I'm stuck in my own personal time zone. This morning / afternoon, we're starting with an announcement of FabLearn's 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award, which is being awarded this year to Cynthia Solomon, and we'll have a keynote address from Cynthia. That again, will start shortly after our logistical discussion here. Then at 1 is the Remembering Mike Eisenberg panel, and that's followed at 2 o'clock by a full papers and educator panel. Those are 2 sessions that will happen in parallel. And then at 3 o'clock, we'll have a short paper session and a demo / poster session that will also happen in parallel.
Yeah, so speaking of that, we're going to try to do a poster session. And if you've been to many conferences, you know that poster sessions don't usually happen from the other side of a computer. And so what this is going to look like is maybe going to be a little bit different, but hopefully it's still really useful and interesting for us all. So here's how it's going to go down. If you go to the FabLearn Conference Canvas website, and if you're on day 2, towards the bottom, there will be 2 links to slides, one for the short paper posters and one for the demo posters. And that slide deck will have a slide for every single poster that's going to be part of this session. And you'll see the different posters that are there. You'll get a brief overview of what each poster is going to be about, what each project's going to be about. And there will also be a link on there that you can click that will open up the Zoom room. The Zoom room will be a series of breakout rooms. So there's going to be a lot of breakout rooms, and you'll be able to choose which breakout room you want to go to. And each breakout room is essentially going to be a poster session. So use the slide deck to sort of see what you want to check out. Go to those rooms when you're in the Zoom session together, and feel free, like you would at a poster session, to jump around, go hang out with somebody for a few minutes, talk to them about their work. And then if you'd like, go join somebody else. One important note about this, though, the ability for you to choose which breakout room you want to be in depends on you having the most up-to-date version of Zoom. So if you haven't yet done so, at some point today, make sure you update your Zoom software so that you'll have that capability to join the room of your choice. Okay. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to message one of us or one of the track chairs, and they'll be able to help you out. Social media. So once again, it was great to see all of you guys talking about the various sessions that we got to enjoy yesterday, the keynotes, the panels, the different papers and educators sessions. So please continue that activity. We're just using #FabLearn, and check out that conversation online. You will also find below 2 links. This first one is a link for the registration. So, once again, people can register even now for free if they would like to come be part of this really great event. And so feel free to send out that URL as you tweet about the cool stuff that's happening. For example, this great keynote we're about to hear. We also are streaming some of these events through YouTube. And so the URL at the bottom there will be a link to the YouTube stream of the keynote. So feel free to use that one too, so other people can enjoy the stuff that we're getting to hear and participate in. Oh, so we decided, based upon a number of people requesting this, that we'll turn the chat on today. So you will be able to engage in a conversation using the chat stream as part of Zoom. Please do so in a thoughtful and respectful manner. I don't think I have to say a whole lot more about that. You're all adults and hopefully wonderful people as well. But feel free to use that to kind of engage in some deep conversations about the cool stuff that we're doing today. Paulo?
Yeah, and I mean the reason the chat was not on yesterday was it's exclusively because of like safety kind of issues because of Zoom bombing and things like that. But since we think things are sort of under control, we'll try that. Of course, we want as much interaction as possible, and so we'll try that today. We owe a big thank you to all the FabLearn chairs. That's all the behind the scenes work that happens throughout the year that no one sees, but it's an enormous amount of work. All the 170 papers, they have 2, 3, or sometimes 4 reviews, then those reviews have to be computed, analyzed, and everything. So it's a huge amount of work, and it's all voluntary. So a big thank you for our chairs, David Weintraub, Kylie Pepler, and Colby Toffel-Grell from the full paper track, Camilla Matuk, Ann Eisenberg, and Tamar Furman, the short paper chairs. Then the young maker chairs, Jan Rio and Brian Leitz, and educator track chairs, Sean Justice, Mike Dando, and Erin Riley. Workshop chairs, Brian Gravel and Fabio Campos. Demo chairs, G. Key and Natalie Freed. And finally, the proceedings chair, Chris Proctor. So thank you so much. I mean, this conference would never ever happen without the voluntary work of this brave and amazing group. And we're so lucky to have them this year. And another quick thing about the chairs is that because of the pandemic and all the kind of difficulties in organizing things and everything, the chairs had to work kind of double duty to find everybody and do all the changes and all of that. So it was really quite amazing. So thank you very much, all of you.
They had no idea what they were getting into this year.
Yeah.
So thank you, guys.
Seemed like a normal year when it started.
It really was like organizing 2 totally different conferences. Also, it was like double chair, once in the spring and again this fall. So super thanks.
Thank you, guys.
So finally we get to our much anticipated keynote of Cynthia Solomon, the FabLearn Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019, last year. So every year we announce someone, and then the following year the person gives a talk. So this is Cynthia's talk. I mean, it's hard to know how to make justice to Cynthia's achievements in this field. Before computer science education, before computational thinking, before Scratch, code.org, before the Silicon Valley infatuation with coding, before CS for all, before everything, there was Cynthia. And the fact that she was, there in the very beginning, and she's a woman, and she was in a, computer science kind of world at MIT and BBN and other places, heading research labs and all of that. It's quite amazing and an inspiration for all of us. Also, back then, programming and coding for kids was not about, the STEM pipeline and getting kids good jobs and like doing what the job market needs and whatever. It was not about that. It was really about making powerful ideas and tools available to kids so that they can express amazing and incredible ideas, so that they can use those new tools to do things that were unimaginable before. It was about making them participate in a world that was changing. as full participants that can, consume and produce things. So a lot of those ideas, if you look at, some of the early writings about this in 1967, in the late 60s, early 70s, I mean, all of those ideas were already there. The idea of how computing and social justice were connected, I think, were also there. And many other ideas that we keep kind of rediscovering every 10 years. So I think for us, it's really important to recognize Cynthia because, instead of rediscovering ideas, we should go back and see what she wrote, back then and honor that work, because that's sort of the definition of foundational work, I think, is what Cynthia did. But now, some more kind of biographical information in the next slide. Cynthia was a pioneer in AI, CS, and educational computing, while at MIT working with Lisp, Cynthia realized that the need for a programming language that was more accessible and understandable for children. And then together with Wally Ferzai and Seymour Papert, she created Logo, which was the first programming language for kids that, if you don't know, you all should, but it's what inspired Scratch, NetLogo, StarLogo, basically all the programming languages, or most of the programming languages that we know today. And she published, extensively on, child education, technology in the classroom, computing education, and all of that. And she was also the vice president for research and development for Logo Computer Systems and director of the Atari Cambridge Research Lab. So, it's really an honor for us to be able to give this award to Cynthia. And I know I really mean this, that there are writings by Cynthia and Cynthia with collaborators literally like 40 years ago that are so important for us to really understand what technology in education means, what computing in education means. And I think it really helps to go back and look at those original ideas so that we not only honor them, but also don't keep recycling things and kind of recreating things that were there before. And I think, as we grow as a field and as computing education grows, and now computing is a mandatory topic in many schools and all of that, it's really easy to get lost in the implementation of things and writing curricula and writing tests and standards and all of that. So it's really easy to kind of get lost in that without thinking about the original ideas and why we do this, right? And I think it's pretty clear that in many other fields, like in math education, science education, sometimes those fields, they got so caught on implementing things and writing textbooks and curricula and all of that, that at some point the joy was lost, like the joy of math, the joy of science, the beauty in learning those things. And I think that's definitely something that was there in the very beginning. So it's really an honor to get to know more of Cynthia's work and thinking. So thank you very much, Cynthia, for being with us. And we're really looking forward. Thank you.
What a great introduction. What happens now?
If you can share those slides that you had back in the Zoom, do the share screen.
Do I start? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Share. Oh, share. Okay.
Perfect.
I thank you, Paulo, for a great introduction. I wish it were all true, but some of it is. And what I chose to do today is give a kind of history, my history, rather than a history. My treading the I started Logo with Seymour Papert, and I collaborated with Seymour Papert and Marvin Minsky for many years. So let me go on and just give you a feel for what it was. Whoops, how do I use this? I want to go to the next slide. I don't know how to do it. Hello?
If you try clicking on your slide, it may have lost focus.
Ah,
There you go.
okay, here's a picture. In the 1960s, the big thing in the early 60s was time sharing. Before that, people to use computers, for the most part, submitted decks of cards, which of course they could drop along the way, and they would get the results back in 24 hours if they were lucky. And the great invention in the early 60s was time sharing, where people could access a computer from remote terminals scattered around the place. And this is a picture of a small time shared computer. It only filled one room, not many rooms. And it was the Digital Equipment Corporation's PDP-1. And that was very significant for the work that was being done in research in computing. I don't know quite what to do. Okay, here. Another reminder of the 60s, which is really very important, was an air of revolution and reform was in the air. The United States lost the fight, the competition with Russia, and the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957 before the United States did. And so the country turned to the pathetic state of K-12 education, and especially math and science education. And so there was a lot of activity, both reforming how school took place. The teacher was being knocked down as the total in charge person, and a difference in what mathematics teaching belonged in K-12 education. There was also a tremendous movement in the late 60s against the war in Vietnam, and also in the slow progress on civil rights, on what we would call justice today. But then it was quite remarkable. And all of that went into the ferment and the freedom that was initiated into the development of Logo. Seymour had the great idea of creating a programming language for children. And this idea was based on his work with Marvin Minsky on making machines intelligent. He joined Marvin in 1964 at the MIT AI lab. And prior to that, for 5 years, he worked with Jean Piaget in Geneva, Switzerland. And Piaget, who liked to think of himself as a genetic epistemologist, pointed out that children were not blank vessels, that they had theories and they were constructors of their own knowledge. And then the third really important element in Logo's development, Seymour's observations of children using a programming language designed for adults. It was called Telcomp, and it was very similar to BASIC. And that's when he was consulting with Wally Feuertzeit at Bolt, Beranek, and Newman. And So one of the things about Logo is it was embedded in very rich research environments. So here's my favorite picture, and the only one I have, of Marvin and Seymour together. This was a picture from 1972. And this is important for me, that Marvin and Seymour both saw the future of computers in children's lives. And these statements are well worth looking at. I'm not going to read them to you. You can read them. So at BBN, there was a research project going on involving this language called Telcom, based on JOS, which was invented at the Rand Corporation. And children were using this language to learn algebra. And Seymour thought it was totally absurd to see children using an algebraic programming language to try to understand algebra, which they didn't understand. So those of us that were involved in this project were all Lisp users. And we thought of Logo as baby Lisp, where the major focus was on playing around with words and sentences. And so here's a picture of the four of us. There's Seymour, me, Danny Barbro, who was head of the AI group at BBN and had just finished his doctorate with Marvin and Seymour, and Wally Feuerzig, the head of the education technology group at BBN. Go. So this tells you who we were. The only person not pictured in there was this recent MIT grad named Dick Grant. He's now a psychiatrist, but at that point he was a programmer and had just finished his undergraduate degree in mathematics. Anyway, by 1967, there was a Logo running in Lisp on an SDS 940 timeshared, and here's what it looked like. There was a summer workshop that Seymour ran and Wally and I observed, and as a result of that workshop, a whole new implementation of Logo was made. We totally redesigned it, and it was designed to run on that computer I showed you a picture of, the PDP-1. So the underlying ideas I want to emphasize: procedural thinking. Debugging was a major activity. And of course, project-based learning. And then giving kids, encouraging them to talk about what they were doing. And with Logo, you could have very long names for things. And we thought that was really important, to give things names so you could talk about them. They didn't use X, Y, and Z. They really gave the things names. And we also emphasize having objects to play with. And furthermore, we emphasized anthropomorphic thinking, like programs were us, we were them. We could debug ourselves and think about, as we thought about debugging the programs. So the newly revised Logo was ready for the fall of 1968. Seymour and I became co-teachers for this group of 12-year-olds, seventh graders. They used teletypes that went over phone lines back to BBN's PDP-1. Originally, Seymour and I were not going to be the teachers. We had a wonderful math teacher for that position. But what happened is she didn't have experience, and she taught about syntax and not at all about projects. And so Seymour and I took over, and I have to tell you, we worked very hard that year in figuring out what were interesting starting projects. And here's Seymour and me with this wonderful 12-year-old, and there's pictures of the teletypes. One of the wonderful projects that we worked on with the children were sentence generators. And this child that Seymour's talking to generated that set of sentences. What was really interesting about working with the children is they had major bugs in what they did, because their first sentences were gibberish. They didn't make any sense at all. Why? Because they mixed up nouns, verbs, whatever. And their explosive current throughout the thing was, oh, that's why they call them nouns and verbs, which was quite telling. So this is an example of the kind of code that they would write in Logo to produce these sentences. We discussed with them how that maybe we could generate math sentences in the same way. So here's an example of generating math sentences. 5 times box plus 10 equals 35. What is box? Now, this was an incredible experience also, because initially the kinds of responses the children made up if you got the wrong answer were really nasty. These kids were, you know, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're whatever. And they started using their programs and were very insulted and hurt by their responses. So it got them thinking about what kinds of responses they ought to give that would be helpful, and how many chances to give their user population. And they became, several of them became very good at simple math problems. So anyway, Logo became the name of a programming language, an environment, and a culture, a way of thinking about computers, about learning, about talking about what you're doing and putting them together. And for us, Seymour and Marvin, me, and others in the world, computing was the base for doing anything and everything, and for thinking about the world. Because of the possibilities of debugging and the freedom to create things, as Marvin said, to create things that never were there before. So in the summer of 1969, Seymour and I left the work at BBN, and Seymour, who was already a professor at MIT, I joined him, and we started the Logo group at MIT. And so the collaboration with Marvin was, the way my interactions went is Seymour and I would talk a lot. Then Seymour would talk with Marvin a lot. Then Seymour would relate what he talked about with Marvin to me, and would relate to Marvin things that Seymour and I had talked about. So it was quite a collaboration. In the spring of 1970, oh yes, I forgot to say, as a result, at the end of 1969, Seymour said, we need something that's more concrete. Words and sentences are okay, but we need something more concrete. And that's how Turtles came about. We didn't have Turtles then. And Turtles, the name came from the work of Grey Walter in England, who had these 2 automatons called Elmer and Elsie. and he called them tortoises. Turtles were built at MIT, and Marvin made us a music box, a 4-voice music box. And in the spring of 1970, we had this public symposium at MIT called Teaching Children Thinking. And that was, there were 750 people attending, and that was an important moment. But Hal Abelson, who some of you may know because of Scheme, and he wrote the Turtle Geometry book and so on. He was a first-year graduate student, and his job was to make logo graphics run on a system that we could bring to a school. And here's, in 1970, Seymour and I team taught again. And then we had 2 floor turtles, a display turtle, and a music box. That black box is the music box Marvin built, and you can see you can't see the graphics very well, but you can see that there's something on the screen there. And so that was, Seymour and I team taught a group of 10-year-olds, 5th graders, in a public school in Lexington, Massachusetts. What came about first was this very well-known micro world around turtle geometry. The total turtle trip theorem was an important element, which stated simply was if you as a turtle, or just the turtle, anyone, started walking a fixed amount forward and turned a fixed amount either left or right, you would eventually come back to where you started from. And or you'd walk in a straight line out to infinity. So, but if you didn't, then you'd make some sort of spiraling effect. So and this is the kind of graphics that we had. And here, we always had animation. You can see it's crude, but there it was. So we always expected animation to be there. And this was a wonderful bird turd. And this child in the class always drew these elephants. So she finally made one on the screen. And here's just a picture of a spiral. The interesting thing about spirals is the children liked the name spiral. So whether it was a triangular or hexagonal spiral, didn't matter. It was still a spiral. And here's Seymour.
Learn mathematics by speaking in mathematics about things that really matter to them. So at MIT, we've given computers the power to turn motors, make sounds, to draw pictures. And we've found ways of giving children the power to control the computer. Now they'll put their little tunes together to make a bigger one.
Sometimes I get into bugs like this, and it'll, when it was doing it in his mind, the little turtle, the little triangle thing, was on an angle, so it drew the picture on an angle.
A computer-controlled turtle is made to draw and dance by programs so simple that all children invent them in the first days of the course. Thus, the child acquires a taste for math power that grows and grows as his projects become more original, more complex, and more varied.
Okay, and one of the other things is that we looked for areas where procedural thinking had tremendous payoff. And we we taught this group of children to juggle, to walk on stilts, to ride a unicycle, and to ride this bongo board. And here I am pushing Seymour. You can see he's balanced. And here's an example. Come on, let's get beyond this. There, here's an example of a child trying to ride the bongo without any suggestions of how it might be good. That child was one of my nephews at 8 years old. Whoops. Okay. What happened in 1972, the summer of 1972, we went to Exeter, England. And Exeter logo was being implemented on a PDP-11. There were special turtle graphics terminals or workstations, which emulated the ones that were made for the AI lab. And a whole group of us went to this math education conference in Exeter, England. And I set up to work with 10 and 12-year-olds a month before the conference, where we set up a logo lab. And as a result of that experience, we, Seymour and Marvin, Seymour's brother, and me, and a couple of other people set up a company with backing from this wealthy cousin of Seymour's called General Turtle, to make turtles available to the world. And these are pictures. Now, at the same time that work was going on with turtles, Marvin designed.
This machine is called 2500, and basically it's a small, very powerful computer which has built into it hardware to run two kinds of displays. This is the central processor. This is the computer itself. This is a display which shows printed material, and you can use several kinds of fonts. In fact, you can design your own type font, and it will do a limited amount of picture displaying ability. And this is called a vector scope, which can show pictures made of lines and curves and points, and can show pictures that move quite rapidly and any kind of animation that you can program. I'd like to introduce Professor Seymour Papert of MIT, who developed the programming language that we use for this kind of animation. That was Professor who designed and built this machine. I'm going to show you how simple it is to write some pictures in the language that we've developed for children and other people.
Okay. Notice he didn't mention the word. Oh, whoops. Okay, but the look at that. So this machine was built just as microcomputers were coming into being, and so it was soon replaced in a sense by Apple IIs and This is I think a major breakthrough for logo. There was a sprite board designed by Danny Hillis at MIT when he was a graduate student, who eventually the sprite board eventually became part of TI's, Texas Instruments, design in their 99/4, their little computer. So it gave you 32 turtles or sprites and color for the first time. And this is a cover of a magazine which was celebrating it. The programming was done at MIT. And that the next thing that happened was that Seymour, Marvin, me, and some other people, Brian Silverman, formed Logo Computer Systems to get Logo out on microcomputers. And so our first task was to make a new logo, although there was a logo that these guys developed at MIT. We made a whole new logo for the Apple. And I wrote this introductory turtle graphics thing and oversaw the development, the language. And once we got it out, the operation moved to Montreal, and I moved on to become director of Atari Cambridge Research. And most of the folks who were working with me in this Boston group joined me at Atari, where we could get back to doing research. And here I am talking about it.
Our research has been motivated by our past experiences in the Logo group at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, where we worked with Seymour Papert and Marvin Minsky. We looked at ways to control computers through gestures, by touch, and by gross body movement. We designed an object-oriented logo and developed applications in it. We built several mechanical devices to add new dimensions to computing environments. We began to build tools toward a musical PlayStation. As always, we continued our work with children.
Cute. Well, Atari didn't last very long. It got sold, and the research labs, mine was one of 5 that Alan Kay supervised or set up or whatever. And so 3 of the people that were worked with me became the first graduate students at the Media Lab. And that force feedback joystick also went to the Media Lab and became a base for people's research there.
Our research has been
repetition.
Motivated
I'm
by
not
our past experience.
Oh, there. Well, one of the things that we did at Atari was we got our friends to collaborate on writing up various logo projects. This book came out just as Atari folded, and but it's available on my website. There's, if you're curious, most of the projects are pretty. Atari logo had really interesting graphics. It was pretty specific to that, but there it is. The other thing that I did was I went back and finished my doctorate and this is the book that got published, and it too is on my website, and it talks about computer environments for children, the computer as in charge of the child, and the child in charge of the computer. So I think that you would find it interesting. So one of the things that happened for many years, because Marvin grew up with Tinker Toy and always loved playing with things. Marvin always played with things. I remember at one time we looked at a Heathkit as a possibility to control through logo. It didn't happen. But so when Seymour and Lego got together, it was very exciting. And so that was an important part of going on. But I want to get, I'm going on a lot. Here's different ways that turtle geometry exists today. There's turtle art, which is quite wonderful. There are versions of Logo that, and in Snap, you can do turtle geometry. It's very hard to do turtle geometry in Scratch because of the decisions they made to avoid it. What I'm doing, one of the things I did recently was Marvin wrote 6 wonderful essays on education. And I promised him I would try to get them out as a book, which I succeeded in doing. These wonderful drawings were done by Xiao Xiao, who became my co-editor, and she had been a graduate student. She got her doctorate at the Media Lab, and she's a musician as well as a computer scientist and artist. And here's a picture of Xiao Xiao in Marvin's living room on a swing with Marvin sitting comfortably on his couch. And so here are things Marvin says which have resonated with me. I'm not going to go over them now, but I am going to play this video.
And one of the troubles with education theory until recently is that people had this idea that the best way to learn is to make it a positive experience. Everything should be good. The child should be guided to make very small steps so that they can't make any serious mistakes, and then you learn everything, and when you're all done, you can do the job without thinking because you know exactly what to do. Well, I don't think that kind of learning leads to becoming very good at new problems because you haven't learned enough about bugs. So what we've really got to do is to teach children to enjoy being wrong.
I agree.
And one of the
whoops. So this book has 6 chapters, and there are forewords and afterwards by these remarkable people who were friends of Marvin's or students of Marvin's, but interacted with him on a regular basis. And I have pictures of them in case you want to know who they are. And so you can buy the book or you could download it as a PDF. Every time I read these essays, I get new insights. So enjoy. The other thing I've been doing is I've been involved with 7 other people in doing a history of Logo for HOPL, History of Programming Languages, the ACM Special Interest Group on Programming Languages, which every 10 years has this symposium. And it was supposed to meet in June, but of course, because of the virus, it didn't. And here are pictures of the folks I did it with. We fussed and fussed at each other, but it was, it's done. And it also is online, and you might enjoy reading the different versions of what we have to say. And now my most recent activity is Turtle Stitch, which is written in Snap, and it lets me make things, turtle drawings, and send them out to a computerized embroidery machine. And here's an example of what it looks like in my computer. And here is what it looks like when I send it out to the embroidery machine. I happen to be, this one is using fabric. I'm at home these days with an embroidery machine, and I use cardstock, which has its problems, but it's putting me in touch with the maker things, which are making things for machines. It has some limitations and some interesting obligations. Anyway, this is it. The last thing I made was this, and I'm very lucky that I was collaborating. I have been collaborating with Susan Klimczak, a FabLearn fellow from previous years, and she makes things and I make designs. So for example, this one she made. I mean, she decorated. Anyway, that's it. Do we have time for questions? That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia, so much. Unfortunately, people can't clap, but lots of comments here in the chat.
Okay.
This is amazing. Love the historical review. Such an amazing history. No one better to tell it than you, Cynthia. Groundbreaking work. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. Fantastic historical tour. Well, you can see it later, but lots of very nice comments here. So we do have about 7 minutes for questions. So
Okay.
I'll start with.
I don't want that picture. This one's better.
Yeah, so I'll start with one question, and then we'll open for questions from the audience. So one is a sort of a personal curiosity: is were there moments like stories that no one knows about that kind of define the direction of logo? Like, for example, a command that could go either way, and then you decided on a certain thing, or like any kind of design thing that was that happened in some kind of an interesting way and no one knows about, and that now we kind of all languages adopt something that. So anyways, I mean, I'm just kind of asking about interesting, cool stories that we might not know about.
Turtle geometry is an example of things that people liked and put in. It's in many programming languages: forward, back, left, right. Unfortunately, the implementation in Scratch and Snap doesn't exactly excite me. There's move, and for some reason, there's no move backwards. You have to use a negative number, which for kids is painful. And instead of left and right, they have turn with a picture. So it could be more explicit in not only in picture, but in words. But the first version of logo you wouldn't recognize. Each time that Seymour and I worked with children, logo was totally revised. So glitches, problems we had were changed. I mean, there were a lot of debugging tools that have disappeared that might be useful and might not. There were originally you were going to have to write like if you wanted multiply, you're going to have to write it. Okay. There was add and subtract, and if you wanted the others, you would have to write them. Now, isn't that absurd? But there were a lot of discussions about, and I can't recall any major thing except for the fact that we continually revised the language. And in fact, Seymour kept talking about revising logo, and we never did it. And then, Mitchell came along with Scratch, which has been a very important event. It isn't the change that we would have made. And then the things that Brian Silverman did at Logo Computer Systems, Logo Writer and Micro Worlds, made a lot of changes for good and for not so good. But as a result of experience, they were incorporated. So I don't know about secrets. I have to think about that. I think the big secret.
Okay, so another question here. So you mentioned a lot of very specific choices in the design of logo intended to foreground specific kinds of thinking. I wonder, in your own work with Turtle Stitch, do you think about things like that in the same way when we work with physical materials? So for example, do you think about things like the total trip theorem in the same way that you, when working with physical materials?
Well, what I'm wrestling with is the difference with, I can make a design, and then when it comes time to sending it to the machine, it's like sending it to any machine. I have to make changes. I have to get more explicit and do sort of make micro changes, like go forward 3 steps instead of like I would like 10. I have to, and that is that's a big difference. The basic ideas are in my head, but the specifics are what you'd have to do. Like, well, the story about, was Seymour and I were teaching these 5th graders. One of the projects they worked on was making the first letter of their names. And this one child, Peter, was making a P and it wouldn't, the capital letter, the P wouldn't close. And what happened, it was Seymour and I were there studying what the problem was, and in walked this graduate student sent to us saying, what's going on? And we told him, and he said, oh, it's because you screwed up on symmetry. And so we had to go back and rewrite our arc procedure because we were going forward and turning. And what we had to do is go forward, turn forward to preserve symmetry. Hadn't thought about that. But it's that kind of thing that comes up with machines.
So I think we have time for one more. And so I'll ask a question for Gayatri from UPenn. And so what do you see as the future of design of programming environments? How do you think we can diversify the designers and learners in this space?
I think that...
we have like 2 minutes just to let you know.
I think a lot of people don't know how to work with kids and relate that back to what they're designing. I keep hearing when I see things that look very complicated to me that, oh, we tried it with kids. But I've also seen people try things with kids and force the kids to accept instead of being co-designers or participatory designers. And I think that's very key, especially the user interfaces people are not focused on. How's that?
Cynthia, thank you so much for being here. You know, too bad we can't have you here in person, but we will hopefully next year see you in person if we, you know, everything goes right. So thank you again, and again, the video is on YouTube, and we'll send everyone the, you know, a summary of the chat and the questions. Okay. And now we're going to the Remembering Mike Eisenberg panel. So you can, you know, click on that Zoom link, and we're starting right now. So thank you. Thanks all. And let's meet in the other room. Bye.
Thanks, Cynthia. Bye, everybody.
Now, how do I get to that room? Leave this. I have to leave this.
We'll send you the link. It's on the chat. If you...
Oh, I love your hair.
Good. No hair.